Good morning, everyone. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Executive Review Session for January 15th, 2019. We'll begin with the appeals calendar, continued hearings, item number 1, 2017-248A, Long Island Expressway and 74th Street, Queens.
They requested an adjournment. We just got the formal written request this morning.
Okay. Next is the special order calendar, continued hearings. Item number 2, 866-49BZ, 200-01 47th Avenue, Queens.
Okay, they provided a photo showing the storage container removed, but then it reveals there's dumpsters that are not located within an enclosure, but the plans were revised to show the container removed. We really need to build a dumpster enclosure. I don't know why, this seems very hard, this application, to just move little bits along, but they need to build a dumpster enclosure. Any other comments on this?
And would that be prior to any board vote? So that, should they build that now?
They should build it now, because what are we doing here? This application was submitted in 2016 for a variance that expired 2015. And it was adjourned 3 times, so, because I don't feel confident they'll do it once we grant. Okay.
Item number 3, 30-58BZ, 184-17 Horace Harding Expressway, Queens.
This was administratively adjourned.
New cases, item number 4, 645-59BZ, 10824 Flatlands Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. The community board has not yet met on this, but I would like to understand why not, since they've had the application since early October. There wasn't an explanation for, maybe there was something the applicant didn't provide or something like that, I don't know. We do have a letter of no objection from fire department from mid-December. Photos show a dumpster not within an enclosure, but the drawings show there is an enclosure, so maybe the photo was taken in a place where the dumpster shouldn't be, I don't know. The lumen spread diagram is showing very high lumen count at the property line, but uses are not residential uses adjacent, they're commercial, so maybe it doesn't matter so much.
And behind it is the marshland.
Yeah, but I don't even know if the lights, if it was marshland, you would not want lighting because there's wildlife at marshland. But I thought that it was adjacent to a sort of couple-story building, institutional building, and then a commercial building on the other side. Don't know whether the lights are visible to the marshland.
Yeah, the rear of the lot line is just marshland. It's to the east of it is another, I think, commercial, along commercial establishments.
Okay. So if the lights are shining on marshland, that's actually a protected wetland. That's where birds, animals, you're not supposed to have lights that change their sense of what's light day and night. So we need clarification on that.
I had a question based on the Google Street View. It seems there are banners that are mounted along the rear lot line fence, and they don't seem that they're accessory signs. So would need some explanation, and I don't think those are permitted, so those should be removed.
Okay. Anybody else?
Just on the public hearing, I saw a letter saying that you will meet tomorrow, so just wanted to mention.
Community board.
The community.
Yeah,
community
it'll meet
board's meeting
tomorrow, right.
However, Chair's question was why there was such a long gap. The application was submitted.
In
October.
the October 1 was the official submit date, even though the community board might have gotten it a tiny bit before. So that they have 60 days, so that would have been up already. And so the question is, why does the community board need more time? Because if there were nothing else to do on this site for us, then it would be the community board holding it up, so I'd want to know why.
I see.
But if there's
I see.
more to do, then it doesn't really matter, they're meeting tomorrow.
Understand.
Okay.
Item number 5, 58-99BZ, 1810 Utopia Parkway, Queens.
We have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. We need the community board, I didn't see any sign of when, what. That was submitted also beginning of October. The lumen spread, we have fire department letter of no objection from the December 20th. The lumen spread shows it's very high on the sidewalk along the Utopia Parkway frontage, but I don't really think that's an issue because if anything, you want lighting on the sidewalk. The site looks good, except that satellite imagery shows cars parked on the sidewalk. I don't know if anyone saw cars on the site
I
visit.
didn't have a chance to meet
This is a big, really big site, so why do you need to park cars on the sidewalk? That I didn't understand. And as a result of that, the sidewalk is all broken, so they need to replace the sidewalk. It's not a repair, it's a replace. It's all broken from the weight of the cars.
Based on the photos provided by the applicant and also from the Google Street View map, it seems that there are more cars parked within the property, especially along 18th Avenue. And when I looked at it, the plan, it seems it's possible. And since there is an issue with trying to provide parking within the site and spilling onto sidewalk, I would recommend the applicant to consider possibly increasing the amount of parking that can be provided on-site to eliminate the need to use the sidewalk.
I get the impression they do both, that's why.
I think you can maximize parking on the site. It seems like that's something that they could rearrange to maximize
Yeah,
parking on the site.
Exactly.
I do agree that the sidewalk does need to be replaced, though. And I'm
And-
wondering if there's anything we can do to ensure no parking on the sidewalk, but it doesn't seem like there's a solution that can guarantee that after.
So, you
I'd
know,
love to hear what the community board has to say about this particularly.
so this is like this ongoing problem for almost every one of the commercial uses we deal with. It's illegal to park on the sidewalk, right? And in a few cases, like this one coming up, they're going to be installing cameras and so on. But surveillance is only as good as the surveyor, right?
As enforcement,
Yeah.
you know?
And the people who are the real enforcers are actually the police department, but then you have to have somebody who's constantly calling the police and ticketing. So we did have another case last week where they put up a sign that says cars parked on the sidewalk will be towed at owner's expense. But again, that's the management who has to be
Call the tow
willing
truck, yeah.
to call the tow truck, et cetera, and alienate their clients, et cetera, right?
I feel oftentimes it is the management that is placing the cars
Yeah.
on the sidewalk for their other uses that they need the extra space. I think that perhaps the best way to handle it is to maximize as much parking on the site.
Right, and also to make an operational plan.
Right.
See if there's a way to control this.
Also, the applicant needs to indicate in the plan the location of the trash container. Based on the photos provided, the trash container was located outside the building and not in an enclosed.
Not an
And not in
enclosed.
an enclosure.
Not in an enclosed, at least from the site plan provided and from the photos, there isn't a built enclosure. And the trash container is located outside the building.
Okay. Okay, so there are 3 immediate things that need to be physically done: repair the sidewalk, install a trash enclosure, and come up with an operational plan for more,
On-site.
for removing the parking on the sidewalk, and that might include fencing, cameras. That's how it's worked in some of the other sites. Okay.
Item number 6, 159-07BZ, 2402 86th Street, Brooklyn.
There are no notice requirements for extensions of time to obtain a C of O. We do have fire department letter of no objection, but fire department notes there are violations. Oops, just a sec. They say they issued 2 violation orders for operating without a certificate of operation, and also that the fire alarm system needs to be restored. And they said that, though, they have no objection to the application itself, however. Statement of fact states there is nothing holding up the issuance of the CO except this decision. I'd like them to verify that because it's been a long time. Why isn't there a C of O? And are the massage licenses current? Anybody else?
Item number 7, 93-08BZ, 113-16 Astoria Boulevard, Queens.
There are no notice requirements for extensions of time to complete construction. This is a 2009 variance, and we are 10 years late in completing. So I just put out there, what is a reasonable standard to expect an applicant to return for a new variance? There's got to be a point at which you cut off, right? We didn't get any copies of permits or the construction schedule. They do show photos, fortunately, that shows significant expenditures finally. There's a lot of excavation and supportive excavation that you can see in the photos, but that's from September, so I would like to see updates. There's also an E designation on the site for hazmat, and so they need to provide evidence that excavation has proceeded according to a OER protocol, and there has been DEP sign-off, which is referred to in the resolution, because I hope they're not removing all that soil. The reason they got the grant is because the site is contaminated. I'm hoping this didn't end up, as landfill. Okay, anybody else? No.
I'd like a little more of an explanation as to why 10 years have passed. A bit more detail because I do second the chair's position that there has to be some sort of cutoff to requesting a new variance. But I'd like this to be taken a bit more seriously and give us some more detail and some facts as to why this has been delayed so long.
They said there was like ownership change and things like that.
There was a
but-
fire.
I just want it substantiated.
Right, yeah.
I want it substantiated. I want evidence of it because 10 years is a long time, and there have been cases that we've had that there are good reasons, but I'd like to see some substantiation of it.
It's true, there was no evidence, it was just
Right.
a statement.
It's just a
that
statement
this
that says
happened.
these
It was
things
a fire.
happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Item number 8, 245-15BZ, 350 West 50th Street, Manhattan.
Okay, there are no notice requirements for extensions of time to obtain a C of O. It's the same. Fire department issued letter of no objection on December 29th, but notes that there are violations for operating without a certificate of operation, that they need to restore the fire alarm system and provide letter of approval for the fire alarm system, and that the assembly division, place of assembly division will continue to perform inspections, but that there was no objection to this extension of time. I didn't have any other comments. Anybody else? No. For Jim.
Item number 9, 2016-4141BZ, 27 Barclay Street, Manhattan.
They failed to give notice, so we have to postpone the hearing.
Appeals calendar, decision items, item number 10, 2016-4142A through 2016-4146A, 70 through 78 Cunard Avenue, Staten Island.
They requested a withdrawal.
Oh,
Item, continued hearings, item number 11, 2016-4473A, 72-74 East 3rd Street, Manhattan.
Okay. For this one, I noted that the commissioners were emailed many times by some of the occupants of the units, and I didn't see that those emails made it into SharePoint. So, because I didn't see any updates in the opposition file, so the neighbors they're basically concerned about what happens if once we decide. If we grant, then how does it affect them? And this is kind of, we've heard these concerns before, but you could see it going back and forth in the emails. And the other one was the representatives of the applicant hired an engineer an architect to do an inspection of the units, and apparently the notice to the neighbors was very short, and so people were complaining that, how can I give you access? I'm in, this person's in Portugal and that person's in India and so on, so we can't possibly give you access on this short notice. So I just want to summarize what those things said, because you may not have seen them if you didn't read the emails, and we had directed them not to send emails directly to the commissioners, and that's part of the problem. It didn't go to submit, so our normal process didn't make it into the folders. So at the board's request, the architect and fire code consultants conducted an inspection of the fireproof self-closing doors, the smoke detectors, and the hallway fire resistance ratings. They were able to gain access to 13 of the 9 units in the building. The survey, which came, 13 of the 19 units in the building. The surveys, and they were kind of independent surveys. There's one from the fire code consultant and another one from the architect. The surveys indicated the need to replace all closers on all the fire doors, but there was no determination that the doors themselves needed replacement. Sorry, what just happened here? Okay. My computer just decided to not show me anymore what I needed to see. Okay, that the doors themselves need a replacement, and they're all said to be 1.5-hour doors, and there was one photograph provided where you could see the little tag, but we know actually you can't see the tag on all of them, so I'm not sure whether that qualifies if you don't see, if the tag is painted over. I'm not really sure what that does. All but 2 units have hardwired smoke detectors, but then the survey didn't discuss what's proposed for the 6 units to which access was not obtained. I'd like fire department to comment on the determination made by the survey, and especially the determination that the existing corridor walls are plaster over concrete masonry units, and that 2 layers of 5 1/8 inch chipboard is located around the doors, for example, and whether that's an adequate fire rating for this purpose of an MDL waiver to add something to the roof. The plans were amended to reflect the determinations in the surveys, but we're missing the determination about those 6 units. So either they go by default that everything needs to be replaced, or we need an update, something. Anybody else on this one?
I think, yes, there was a little bit of, the timing of it may not have worked for everybody, but nearly 70% of the units were surveyed, and the remaining 6 that were not, now that everybody's back from vacation, there could be an agreement, or this could be a part of a blanket approval, that requirement that they do follow up with all the units and ensure that all the hardwire smoke detectors have been checked and are operational, and the doors.
Well, so it's much more direct if we say those doors are, either you do a survey now, or you say those doors, those smoke detectors.
Have to be presumed not to be replaced.
Right.
And that's what I support that. It doesn't seem like this was done in bad faith or anything like that.
Right,
It seems
it's
like,
not.
so I support that either the applicant comes to us and states that we're going to replace everything as if, presuming that that these 6 units aren't up to code, or up to the rest of what we're doing with the rest of the building. Or we adjourn for another day for them to go see all 6 units
Right.
and give us the proper information. It may be,
I
in my
just
opinion, may be safer, faster, and speedier for them to do the presumption, less costly to do the presumption now than to wait for another inspection.
Except to say that the condo board still has to decide whether they even want this project to proceed, so.
And that, unfortunately, we're not.
So I don't know
That's
where
not-
they are on that, so maybe we're not holding anything up.
Right.
I mean, they're waiting for all the approval process to come in and then for them to weigh in on it, so they have some ways to go.
Right.
And I think in one of the many chains of emails and oppositions that we did get, there was a question that was raised was who was going to pay for all of these improvements?
Right.
And I think the applicant made it clear in its last submission that they were going to bear the cost of it.
Right.
Though I would just want to caution is that there, some of the residents may not want to give access.
Right. Well, so
And
then you have
so
to
we
assume.
just have, so there will be some who will hold out, and so we will then at the end have to put a recommendation that ensures that all the units are going to be fire safe
Yeah.
by those minimum standards.
Yeah, it's not a recommendation, it's a direction in
Requirement.
here. Because so we've had other much bigger buildings that have
Right.
changed like this, and where I don't know if any of them were co-ops or condos, I think they were all rentals. But still, they weren't able to necessarily get into all the tenants' spaces because the tenant refused access, right? But the drawings still indicate what has to be done in order for them to get a C of O, right? And that's the goal, right? So at a certain point, you have to get in, you have to make sure that the door is 1.5 hours, there's hardwired smoke detectors, et cetera, right? So,
Just, there is the discrepancy between the attorney letter and the architect's letter. The architect says 13 out of 19. He accessed 13 out of 19. The attorney letter actually mentioned just 12. So this need to be clarified.
and the engineer letter was the same.
The
right?
architectural say 13 out of 19, but the attorney in the submission
But
letter.
there's two, there's a code consultant, there's a fire code consultant letter, and there's an architect letter. And they were pretty much on the same page in terms of the work that needs to be done, but I didn't, the code consultant had a chart, and I didn't count the numbers on the chart, I just read what the architect said. Okay, so clarify how many units.
Madam Chair? I think it's just for the residents in the building, maybe important to ensure that their concerns or comments are part of our record. If they would maybe resubmit their concerns that were sent directly to the,
I don't know if we want them to resubmit. We have them. We can just.
Oh, we do
upload
have them.
and
Okay.
resubmit. We'll just take care of that. No need to
Fine.
send additional emails.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure.
Unless there's something new that they want.
Unless there's something new they want to say,
Yeah.
there's no need to resend what they've already sent. We can just make sure that the emails we have are put into
Yeah.
submit into the
Right.
appropriate folder.
Thank
I
you.
just don't want to encourage more traffic.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Item number 12, 2017-318A, 155 Johnson Street, Staten Island.
They requested an adjournment.
Decision items on the zoning calendar. Item number 13, 2016-4128, BZ, 511 Canal Street, Manhattan.
Okay, the fire department at the last hearing requested time to inspect the site. We now have their letter of no objection indicating that the fire alarm applications have been filed and that fire department will monitor the progress. And I think that was the only open issue.
And the community board vote has also come in.
What was it?
It was 39-0 in approval.
Item number 14, 2016-4238, BZ, 388 Broadway, Manhattan.
Okay. Photos were provided to show the ADA access sign, and the bell was added to the front door, though I'm not sure how you know what to do with that bell, but at least there's a phone number that's very clear. And they revised the plans to add a note to that effect. And they showed us photos of the reception desk, but I actually can't tell which one of the very many things on the reception desk is the bell response, but it doesn't matter. Okay. Anybody else? No?
Continued hearings, item number 15, 2017-43BZ, 140 Hendricks Avenue, Staten Island.
Okay, as requested, the lot width and building width studies were amended to support a 15-foot wide building as at the low end of typical for the neighborhood. This allows for compliant front and rear yards and one compliant side yard, so reducing only one of the side yards from 8 feet to 5 feet. So I think that might have been the only waiver requested.
Right.
Open area? Oh, side yard and open area.
It was a
the
side
same.
yard and
Yeah,
open.
sorry, the same waiver.
And that
Anybody-
was our concern regarding how it qualifies for the uniqueness. And I thought the applicant did a good job of explaining the differences, and especially many of these older buildings were built at a earlier period, and the newer ones that have been built, they've been built on bigger lots, except for 2 that have been built on 15 foot. So it is unique from that point of view. So I was satisfied with that response.
Anybody else?
Item number 16, 2017-268BZ, 33-73, 154th Street, Queens.
We still don't have a community board recommendation. I note the wrong one is in the folder. It's for a completely different application. So whoever case this is, please fix that. We do have the fire department letter of no objection, which says there is a sprinkler application that's required to be filed. The sprinkler system shall be designed to cover all areas of the premises, including the caretaker's apartment at the 3rd floor. This agency takes exception that the DOB should have required additional filing of a range hood kitchen suppression system in the kitchen located at the cellar floor. Such application shall be filed with the fire department prior to installation of the suppression system and inspected by the Bureau's range hood unit. So we'll put that in the conditions. The project has been revised to allow for 1 parking space for the master's car. I'm just wondering, though, even though it would be tandem parking, since the side yard has been widened to 11 feet on that side, why not just allow for more parking spaces along the side yard line and operate it during services with valet or something? At least that would address maybe 4 or 5 cars on the site, because obviously parking is of huge concern to the neighborhood. We are waiting for an updated DOB objection sheet for the reduced side yard which is the result of widening one side to 11. It reduces the other side to need a waiver. Although requested, the parking study was not modified to address specifically the presence of the new church that was developed recently. The applicants contend that the church opened in November 2017, so prior to the date that the May study was done, May 2018 study was done. Sorry.
No.
So they're saying it had opened already several months before we conducted the May study, but I'd like to say that, not knowing anything about the parishioners of that church, isn't it possible that the church didn't become active with new parishioners until after May? So that, it doesn't really start to pick up, or it was constructed, but it didn't really get into full operations until much later. Or is it that May is a quiet time for the church? That's another thing, because I don't want to discount the testimony of the public that said it's impossible during services on a Sunday to park. And not only is it impossible, but the cars are all in my driveway. So it's not that they're not experiencing those problems. Figure 2.4-4, which is the location of temple members by distance, indicates that many more than 50% of the membership lives more than 3/4 of a mile from the site. So it would not probably qualify for a CPC parking reduction special permit. And unlike some other houses of worship we review, there is no prohibition against driving or doctrinal direction to walk to worship services, as far as we've been told, right? And anyway, some people are many of them are living more than a mile. Trash, they showed trash enclosure on the exterior of the building. It needs to be on the interior of the building for food, and on the interior of the building, and with a refrigerated storage for the food perishables. There is ample storage space in the cellar already. There's lots of area that's called storage. I also don't see the justification for the 25-foot rear yard at the apartment floor. That should be made to comply with rear yard regs. There's no reason for that 5 feet. And that way, that apartment floor wouldn't actually need waivers other than floor area. And as far as I can tell, actually, so I think there's a lot wrong with the calculation on the drawings and the diagrams on the drawings. That apartment floor complies with the side and front yard regs and the front and side sky exposure plane. There's a side yard setback requirement, which isn't really a sky exposure plane. So it's only in need of a floor area waiver if the rear yard were pulled back. I don't see how the building is not complying with front yard sky exposure plane under section 24-34 and 24-521. It is set back as required from the street line more than 15 feet. The height above the front yard is less than 25 feet, and the building sets back behind the front yard sky exposure plane. So I think the diagram is just wrong. And I think now with an 11-foot side yard, the building complies on that side with the side setback requirements as well, and that the diagrams that are made for that are incorrect. They should look at section 24-551. I think the reason that they're incorrect is the citations on the drawings are to residential district regulations and not community facility regulations. So, and it's odd because the Department of Buildings objection cites community facility regs, so I don't know how they got into the residential. Sometimes there is, it'll say in the community facility regulations that in this district you need to use, or for this use, you need to use residential, but I didn't find that applicable here. Neither of the masters were present for the last hearing, and I am hoping that one or both of them can attend this one to respond to the commissioner's questions about operations, because I didn't feel like the person who spoke really had a good handle on the operations. It was stated at the hearing that the building isn't used by anyone other than the masters and voluntary cleaners from Monday to Saturday. I actually do have a lot of experience with Buddhist temples, so my experience has been that masters speak with congregants during the week for private audiences and to counsel on or celebrate life events. So I would think that that would be the case here. I'd like to hear about that, because there was an impression by the board that the building's not used at all except on Sunday. In addition, there is often in such temples study preparation for children or young adults learning scriptures. Isn't that anticipated here? Just asking. Yeah.
No, I think that my comments are, a good portion of my comments are with the lack of an operational plan or, the programmatic needs of this school. I don't see anything that really, that pushes for what they're requesting and why. And we've done, and at the last hearing, we spoke a lot about the particular heights and whatnot, and I expected that this submission would address that very thoroughly.
Right.
And it didn't. And also, to second what you stated a bit earlier, I expected much more, the applicant to address the statements of the testimony a bit more concisely. And we had issues on the last date with their parking study and how that could be, with their parking study, the reflection of the community, how those things were so far opposed that they need to really get to the bottom of that before I start feeling comfortable. But I do need to see a real study onto the flow of this building, why certain heights are necessary, and I understand that the height of statues should be in a certain way, but we didn't get anything that supports that.
Right. Yes.
I just,
I just had a few more, let me just finish that, and I'm sure it'll pick up. So that, they said that no instruments are being used, but Buddhist temples use gongs and bells. I believe at the last hearing, the board requested that the information on room standards be provided. I didn't see anything provided. How are the sizes of a given function determined, especially the dining room and the meditation hall? And the meditation hall is what's in the cellar. And in the cellar, there's an area behind the circle, that's the circumambulation room. And it's described as storage. And I'd like to know if that's really storage or if that's accessible by worshipers and location of religious statuary, because the temples that I've been in, there's the room where you circumambulate, and then there's another room you go to where there's like a row of the statuary, and you go behind there, so there's more small, kind of like mini chapels. And it just seems strange that they're pulling this round thing so far forward into the building, and there's like so much leftover space that's kind of wasted, right? So I'm curious that's probably, that may not be, quote, storage, because they have a lot of storage in this building. And then the other was, I saw a shower maybe designated in the cellar, ADA toilet, so what's that for? Maybe it's not a shower, but it looks like a shower. I'm sorry, so go ahead.
I had a question, same question regarding the trash enclosure. Based on the section B in the plan provided, the proposed floor-to-ceiling height on the first floor is more than 18 feet 4 inches. Based on the statement, the applicant has stated that the statue height is of certain height, and they need to maintain a reasonable amount of a clearance from the height of the statue, and therefore they need 18 foot 4 inches of floor-to-ceiling height on the first floor. Interior dimensions were not provided in the plan, but just eyeballing it, I think the height of the first floor can be reduced by at least 2 feet or so. That can also reduce the degree of the waiver. And you can still maintain the 8 foot 4 inches height, total height. So
8 foot 4, 18,
sorry,
4.
18 feet 4 inches. 18 feet 4 inches can still be maintained.
So I just think the drawings weren't corrected. I think in an effort to respond to the board's comments, they brought the height down to show that a floor-to-ceiling of 18.4 works, whereas before it was 20-something.
It still is, I think it is still more than 20.
It's still, but the drawings I think the drawings aren't reflecting their determination that 18.4 is actually the floor of the
Right.
ceiling height, because you don't need 4 feet of structure for a roof, right? So especially this is not a large span or anything like that, so.
I don't think they're showing a very deep structure. It's a 1 foot roof structure.
Right.
So it's just factoring that 1 foot in, that height can be brought down. That's really
Right.
all I'm getting at. With regards to I had concerns with regards to the third floor, the caretaker's unit, which is over 1,000 square feet, and the applicant referred to a BSA case where 940 square foot was granted for caretakers. Keep that in mind that 920 square foot is typically a 2-bedroom unit, and this area is more than a 2-bedroom.
No, this is 2 bedrooms and a living kind of area.
I'm saying that the typical caretaker units that are provided are 2-bedroom units that are provided in a 920 square feet. This one is providing a 2-bedroom with a study area. There is no kitchen indicated
Right.
here. I'm assuming the kitchen in the cellar is being taken care of, so the 1,000 square foot that is being proposed is much more than is needed. And there is also a book library space separately in the building. Understand that this area will have some of the more rare books, but the justifications are still not there that is convincing me that one needs that big of a space. And I think a 5-foot setback from the rear line can still be provided, and I think programmatically it would still work.
So, some of this is because we didn't have the masters themselves explaining what goes on in that apartment. We see caretakers' apartments for other houses of worship that have, many bedrooms, there are very large kitchens, all of that. So, we need to hear better how it's being used, right?
And I think that's one of the problems that ran through this particular application is without knowing the uses for each, without a real explanation of how each room is going to be used and why it needs to be the way it is, it makes it very difficult to say that this is what they need to get deference.
Right.
Or that this is the minimum variance.
Or that,
Yeah.
This is the
They do
minimum.
get deference, but it's.
Yeah.
right.
This is the minimum
Does this
variance.
deference, right.
And, right,
Or does it merit deference in that particular request?
yes. Mhm. Commissioner Sheta, did you have any other? No. Okay.
Item number 17, 2017-277BZ, 1022 East 23rd Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. They provided a 1920 sandboard map showing the rear yard incursion as existing. I think it was 1930. I think I wrote it down.
1930.
Yeah, wrong, so. Demolition plan was revised to show more than 50% of the exterior walls being maintained on the exterior. They need to add a note, the classic note, removal of existing walls and joists in excess of that shown on the approved drawings. Drawings will void the special permit. The setback dimensions were provided as requested, except at the rear portion of the second floor, attic, and roof. That needs to be provided, so all the setback dimensions, in particular at the second floor and the rear, right, which is what we waive, right? I stated at the last hearing that the second floor should be pulled back to 25 feet and the attic to 30 feet complying. This wasn't done. Just do it. Don't debate. Also, at the non-complying portion that projects into the required rear yard, you can increase the degree of non-compliance at the roof line within the 18 to 20-foot mark. So there's an existing non-complying 18-foot rear yard, which we don't have the authority to do anything with, right? It has an existing roof line. You can't increase the slope of the roof line, which it looks like they're doing in the drawings, because that increases the degree of non-compliance. That's just within that 2 feet from 18 to 20, right? It also isn't clear, but it appears that there are unpermitted incursions in the front yard with there's a sort of stepping plan at the second floor, and I think it exceeds the permitted obstruction into the front yard. And those are my comments. Anybody else? Okay.
Item number 18, 2017-309, BZ, 406 Grexon Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, this is that very disturbing case with a disrespectful owner and operator. We asked at the last hearing that the owner clean up the site immediately and provide photos to show that this work has been done. Photos show the rear yard cleaned of debris and locks, padlocks actually, placed on the doors to the rear to prevent the yard's use by staff. Although we distinctly discussed with fire department that the owner verify with the fire department that this closure would be acceptable. There's no indication that fire department was consulted before they welded on the padlock system. They show, recent burn marks from the welding. The photos show no parking on the sidewalk, at least for now. Fire department and DEC inspected the site almost immediately after the hearing and issued violations and criminal summonses, I'm happy to report. The infractions are severe and hazardous with the storage of a lot of very dangerous chemicals and so on. Which I could go through, but I think everybody has seen that. And the owners certainly know about it because they were issued violations and criminal summonses. The fire department, though, did say, it is our recommendation to the board, if an extension of the term of variance is issued, that as a condition of the variance, the owner install a fire alarm system and sprinkler system. All individuals using flammable and combustible gases must be certificate of fitness holders and permits obtained from the fire department for storage and use of such gases. So we could make it a condition, well, we can talk about whether there's a way to get this stuff installed now, the fire alarm and the sprinkler, knowing that we have this problem with the buildings department, because I frankly don't trust this owner to install it once we're not watching. So far, the owner hasn't had a good track record. So that's something to discuss further if we were willing to move ahead with this. And further, if we were willing to consider allowing this use to continue, I would want all of the required work to be done now. So that's all of the work, right? And the leash, the so-called leash, just be months, not a year, not years. And where there's a likelihood of denial for failure to comply. So months, and then if we see any noncompliance, then we just close it down. We also scheduled a follow-up hearing in February, because this one was just supposed to be a progress review, for submission of revised operational plan and site plan, and to respond to our questions and directions. I listened to the video, but it's very long, so the applicant's rep needs to listen to the video and take very careful notes of all of the issues that needed to be addressed, which included, but it's not exclusive, includes but is not limited to metal picket fencing, landscaping with dense lush garden in that rear yard area, limited access for maintenance and painting to that rear yard area, which needs to be worked out with the fire department, an elevation survey, elimination of the grease source on the sidewalk, which probably includes installing grease traps on the site, environmental consultant involvement for the removal of the contaminated soil in the garden area, removal of unnecessary curb cuts, an operational plan, which I might have said already, gate removal and replacement with fencing at the perimeter, sign removal, full photos all the way around using a grid to locate it on the key plan. These should all be accompanied by photos showing continued maintenance of the site and updates on the resolutions of the many violations issued by fire department and DEC. And we stated that we wanted the tenants to come to the hearing. So, because they need to hear themselves that they're on the verge of losing their business. And they need to understand that, because I don't think they do. Anybody else?
Just, I looked at the folder and I just saw the photos. I didn't like the idea of just throwing footings. We need to get like a submission letter describing what kind of work was done and their intention to proceed. So they just gave us the photos without any explanation. We need to
Yeah.
get this in writing, what was done clearly, so we can keep it in the record.
Right, there were photos of the rear yard, I think the applicant's representative said, here are photos, shows the rear yard clean. It was very brief, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm not comfortable with, I'm still unsure of what activities are being done on the property. Seems like their original plan said one thing, other things came out in testimony. I don't feel like that was properly addressed. I know the fire department found certain evidence of activity that's inconsistent with their operational plan. I also like to know so I want an explanation for that. Why was this going on? What was going on, and for how long? And how we're going to address that these uses that haven't been disclosed are discontinued. Also, I wasn't very clear on what type of tanks they had at the premises, and if there's welding at the premises. Are these acetylene tanks? Do they have the permits to be permitted to use these type of tanks? There is a residential building behind it. I'm not sure what the distances or safety precautions are to ensure the safety of carrying highly explosive tanks. I'm sure the fire department can probably give us insight into that.
And those responses are for the February hearing.
Yeah.
Yes. So the purpose of this hearing was to check in and to get the backyard cleaned.
Right.
Because that's what the community was so freaked out. That was one of the things they were so freaked out about, right? And then we saw also that maybe, it's really hard to tell from the photographs, that the site itself, where the cars are, was a little bit better managed, but I don't really know if that's the case. That was very hard to tell from the photos. And then, of course, the photos show no parking during the time the photographs are taken on the sidewalk.
I would also suggest maybe removal of the dead cars was a one-time operation. Every time we have a hearing, this is a standing
Yes.
requirement, that they provide photos of the site condition, so
Yes.
that it shows that there is a constant monitoring and
Yes.
operation, and
Yeah.
that they intend to do has already started.
Yeah.
And so we just want the photographs every time a new submission is
Yes. And that the rear yard is
similarly.
similar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Chair,
Yeah.
I want to make a note. The applicant made their submission on their own without the representation.
Oh, the applicant,
Oh, so the applicant's rep didn't make the
Didn't make-
submission, it was just the owner themselves?
Are we ready to move on?
What'd you say?
Are we ready to move to the next case?
Yeah, yeah.
Item number 19, 2017-315 BZ, 2030 Eastchester Road, the Bronx.
Okay. Corrections were made to the plans with respect to floor area, sign calculations, and rated occupancy. Fire Department has requested additional time to consider this location and issued a letter of no objection on, they had requested at the last hearing, and issued on December 31st, a letter of no objection indicating that a violation was issued for failure to obtain a public assembly permit. And I just want to verify with Fire Department that it's okay for the board to vote on this, just because, you know, there isn't going to be, what is it, there was like a PA permit in place, and, right, okay. I just want to make sure they're okay with us deciding.
Item number 20, 2018-7BZ, 291 Avenue W, Brooklyn.
Second floor was pulled back as requested to allow for a 25-foot rear yard. They just need to add the standard note, removal of existing exterior walls and joists in excess of that shown on the approved plans will void the special permit. That's all, so please add the note immediately, because I don't think there were any other issues.
Item number 21, 2018-10BZ, 1238 East 26th Street, Brooklyn.
The second floor was, yeah, that's right, the second floor was pulled back also to a 25-foot rear yard. The floor area went up slightly in spite of this because the double height space that had been introduced at the last version was now eliminated. But it maintains the FAR at 1, so, which is why they put double height space in the last version, to bring it down to 1. The required note was added to the plans, and the side yard total with note was corrected, so I think we have everything.
I have a concern.
Yeah.
While I do appreciate that the applicant has pulled back to provide the rear yard on the second floor, I still do not understand why the building height in the rear was increased to 39 feet from 34 feet. And by the way, the building chart shows it as 34 feet 6 inches, and the statement says 33 feet, so those need to be consolidated. And so like, as I said, the setback of 25 feet has been met, but the peak of the roof in the rear has increased significantly. And I understand that may have been done to allow for clearance over the stairwell. I think that can still be maintained, and the roof line can be brought down to match, to be more in line with what's there in the first floor. This, otherwise, this
On the
must...
first
Sorry, in the front of the building, in the attic level. Otherwise, we are looking at a master bedroom that is over 22, that has over 20 foot of floor-to-ceiling height, which is kind of unrealistic, and I just don't want future misuse of that attic space.
Right.
I thought it went up
And the
because,
rear elevation also does not match the floor plan with regards to the window opening. This is...
Yeah, the rear elevation doesn't match the what?
The floor plan with regards to the window openings. It shows, in the plan, it shows one window opening small, whereas in the elevation, there are many more windows reflected. So those need to be...
no, nothing.
Nothing? Okay. See that, thank you.
Item number 22, 2018-20BZ, 2801 Avenue M, Brooklyn.
Okay. This is the third hearing on this application where the architect keeps insisting on the addition of an awkward, useless attic space that is destroying the integrity of the existing house. I've asked repeatedly what the attic is for because it doesn't have any functions allocated in it. You can barely stand anywhere in it, and I've gotten no response. It shows no functions. It's too tall compared to the neighbors. It hangs over the neighbor's property, not their property, but it's like leaning towards the neighbor that's only 2 feet away, property line-wise. And it's totally lopsided, so it's throwing all the weight of this addition towards the neighbor. And it's, by the way, remarkably ugly. So I just have to say, I cannot vote to support this. I firmly believe it will have a negative impact on the neighborhood character, but I would support the little additions at the side yard, but not the attic as presented. So I think 3 hearings is enough. I can bring it to a vote and see what happens tomorrow, but I would vote to deny the application. We just looked at this too many times, and the architect just hasn't made a case for what that thing is for up there. And also hasn't figured out how to design it, which just keeps insisting on doing essentially the same thing over and over again. So,
I think the way this attic design has been done, it's almost, if you were to assume this was a semi-detached building, so it kind of has on one side,
Yeah.
has a flat thing. However, it has now been much more articulated along the corner lot lines, where the dormers have been brought in and the heights have been reduced. So I actually was okay with it. I do have a question. The statement on page 3 states that the wall height of 23 feet 4 inches. When you compare that to the zoning chart and the plan, it states a different number. So please do correct those and do look at ways to make sure everything.
but it isn't a semi-detached building.
It
That's
isn't,
the
it's only,
problem.
right, it's only in that top section,
Yeah.
and that is being done for the staircase. And I'm not sure, I was looking at it to see if there is a way to articulate the stairwell separately and then bring out the dormer. The result may be somewhat different, but not significantly different from what they have because of the stairwell allowing that to come up.
But it's
didn't
their
see that.
choice of where they put the stair. It's just going to the attic. You don't need to have the stair be a straight run from the below stair, or you move the below stair. I mean, attics
I
are
didn't see that
access-
explanation either. I didn't see the explanation that it was because of the stairwell. On the last hearing date, we asked, I remember one of the major question was, what do you need this attic for?
Right.
And I think that's a valid question I would like a response to.
Well, I mean, just,
Does
we
it
get
violate?
so many, every of these projects, every one of them are providing attic. And we have, some of those attics do add to the floor area, but we don't question it.
No,
in
no, no,
terms of-
but
right?
the attics have use. When we see that they have no use, but they're unnecessarily creating really high roof lines and things like that, that tower over the neighbors, we say, bring down the height of the attic, pull the attic back. You don't need to have all of this, right? In this plan, there's hardly anywhere you can be in the attic without crouching. And most attics that we see, vast majority, I would say 99%, have a bedroom up there, have a rec room up there, something that's identified. This is just, I don't know. It's like the gable is just the land of where the gables are, right? So according to that, then, you could modify the design of the attic so that you don't have it, for one, the staircase is just arguably in the wrong place, so that you move it forward. It's a one-flight stair that comes from the lower level into something that's closer to the front of the building, where you don't have this hideous, awkward thing. It looks like the sausage machine cut it off, and that was that. And the effect on the neighbor is terrible, but the effect on the building and the integrity of the building is really terrible. And by the way, this is one of the architects who has done these semi-attached houses and done them in a way that is really, really, let's say, inconsiderate of the adjacent attached house. So there's no sympathy towards the existing structure. It's just mine, mine, mine. And I do have to say that the little addition at the rear, or it's really the side yard, you could have an attic there. You could create that little addition to have its own little sort of tower. There's lots of cute versions of that where you make sort of a turret, and there's this little tower over there, and then you get the benefits of an attic that you can actually stand in. But they didn't try that because the approach is always the same.
Was the board satisfied that this doesn't violate the sky exposure plan?
I think so, but I have to say that that was one of the requests the last time, prove that it doesn't. And I'm so fed up with looking at this because it just never gets better. That was the least of my review, was whether it still was penetrating the sky exposure plan.
No, it's not.
It's not?
I though would say that I would prefer them not to add any more height to the rear because of the way the building transitions from the lower building on the next door to, I'm just trying to get to the streetscape. So if this was a taller, if the rear was slightly taller, I think just the transition from the neighboring building would be a little bit more awkward. And I think the previous iteration, the height of the rear portion was also taller. So by bringing that down, that I liked. I liked the elevation of the 28th Street. It seems it's being responsive. And I do understand the chair's concern of how can you replicate that on the side yard portion.
No, you don't replicate it. You treat it in another way, but you don't treat it as if it's the back of the building, because, by the way, it's not just the back of the building, it's also the frontage on the other, whatever the name of that street is on the side.
On
Avenue
Avenue.
M.
Right.
I mean, what's terrible looking is the Avenue M frontage, and then also the impact on the poor neighbor to the side.
And I think that's a result of the way the side yard is being treated. The Avenue M it's an outcome of this.
Right, but I mean, I have to say, and I made this comment, it's already the third time, there are so many ways to address a rooftop addition when you can't be symmetrical. But this isn't one of them, right? And it's just, I don't want to be, in the end, whatever, but I don't want the BSA to be responsible for encouraging really bad stuff.
I think maybe one of the ways to look at it, this dormer, I'm just asking the question to Chair. I mean, the dormers could be extended both sides with the staircase being a little bit higher, and that may address the concern also. That way, it would look like a roof line that's going parallel to Avenue M, and then the staircase.
But do we really want to be here on hearing number 4?
No, I agree with
because the
you.
architect can't design?
I agree with you.
Really, that's what this is about. how many times do you get to do this tiny little project, right, with hardly any floor?
And it is kind of unfortunate,
No floor
the
area.
request that is being asked on the lower floor is very modest
Yes.
compared to all the other projects that we
Yes.
do see. So just modification of this would address the issue. So I do take back what I
I
said.
I really hope they could do that quickly by tomorrow.
Say again?
If they could rectify this by tomorrow, that'd be great, but I don't know if we have time to review
I
it.
think that if it could have been rectified by this particular person, it would have been done on the second hearing. But it's like deaf ears each time. Because, there's just so, I always, if you go on Google Image, you find 1,000 solutions for your problem. You don't have to be original. You can copy somebody else's.
Item number 23, 2018-119BZ, 8701 4th Avenue, Brooklyn.
I actually didn't find anything submitted in the folder. Did
Yeah.
anybody else?
No, nothing was submitted.
I looked everywhere, I looked in emails, I looked in SharePoint, the last minute SharePoint folder, nothing.
All
And
they had to do was revise the drawings to reflect the sound attenuation and the
Yes.
flooring.
Right,
And
To make it consistent with what they represent in the
Right.
facts versus the.
right.
Exactly.
Well, it was also, and then I said that because they have bikes and rowing machines, they needed to increase the
Right, increase the
padding.
thickness of the.
And the applicant's rep put up a little bit of a fight against
course,
that,
yeah.
and so maybe that's the reason they didn't come back, and this was only last week. Right.
Do you want me to try to follow up on that submission, or?
Yeah, I mean, otherwise, it's going to have to be moved over. We kind of gave them a break and said it's
Yeah.
only a week, so don't worry, it's not a big thing, but they didn't take us up on the offer.
Okay. Item number 24, 2018-132BZ, 100 Church Street, Manhattan.
Okay, Our main issue with this was that there was hardly any information on the drawings, so they requested, as requested, they supplied the fire egress routes, the acoustical attenuation treatments in great detail now, and location of equipment. So now we know how it's going to be used, how it's protecting adjacent property, tenancies, and how you get out.
Great.
New cases on the zoning calendar. Item number 1, 2017-98-BZ, 21 West End Avenue, Manhattan.
Okay, this is a legalization. We have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends approval. We do have DOI. The fire department recommends a conditional approval. So I just wanted to make sure in this case, whether they're okay with us voting on this prior to the installation of a fire alarm, because that means fire department has to stay on top of them in case they don't install. That's how we got into these difficulties in the first place, because they don't install very often, right? So, okay, any other comments on this?
I feel like I'd prefer to wait for the installation before voting on.
So this part, you haven't been involved in this, but if you'll note, this one was only submitted in March of 2017, but for instance, we had others that were submitted in 2015 and 2016, where at the time, the fire department's position was, if it's a legalization, you have to install the sprinklers and fire alarm if they're not in already. Sprinklers seem to have been less of a problem, but fire department approval, fire alarm approval was, the fire department was working to enable that to happen, but it was buildings that said, absent the approval from the board, we can't issue a permit for the installation of the fire alarm. We thought we came up with various solutions. None of those ideas worked since they weren't solutions. And so maybe out of 30 applications, 2 got to install their fire alarms, and everybody else sat there for months waiting for something to happen. So fire department looked at it again and said, maybe there's another way. They have investigation units, so they can actually go and put it on their radar and take a look, was it installed? And issue violations, which we can't do, right? So, yeah.
That's interesting.
Because we used to have, the standard before all of that was a conditional approval. And there was no enforcement, no follow-up whatsoever. 10 years later, still no fire alarm. That's why having a fire department willing to follow up is what makes this potentially possible. Right. Okay.
Item number 2, 2018-98 BZ 160-10 Cross Bay Boulevard, Queens.
My first question is this a legalization? Because Planet Fitness is such a huge enterprise. When you look up the address shows up, but then I couldn't click on become a member of this gym. So I didn't know whether that was a legalization or not. So, but we do have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board has not yet heard this and request we keep the record open until their February 7th meeting. They had an explanation for why they would like us to do that they had requested some information and never got it from the applicant. We have one letter in support, we have DOI, and again, fire department recommends a conditional approval. And then I would like them to provide information about acoustical attenuation treatment for the areas with cycles, rowing machines, and treadmills, since they're all located above other uses.
I believe the second floor, at least based on the photos provided, second floor is under construction, so I'm not sure if it's a legalization or not, unless they have a partial operation on the first floor. I have question, and I just...
That's based on photos.
Based on
the
photos. Were from 2018.
Ah.
So that's why I'm
Yeah,
not very
that's-
sure.
Because they
I don't know.
submitted in June, so they may have finished. That's,
Yeah. I didn't make a specific site visit, but I do remember going by this site last summer, and I do remember seeing construction, so. In terms of the commercial I just had a question, and that is, this site has a commercial overlay that is 87 feet deep, and the existing footprint is 98 feet, and the gym is going to, at least on the ground floor, it is going to expand, it's going to occupy the entire depth of that floor plate, which is 98 feet. However, on the second floor, it's okay. The second floor depth is 86 feet, which is within the commercial overlay. So I just wanted to flag that, and because I know that question has been raised as to containing the commercial, the PCEs within the commercial overlay.
so
I
it's
just wanted-
verified.
Yes.
Yeah. In terms of the signage that has been proposed, it is 210 square feet, which exceeds the permitted 150 square feet per zoning resolution section 32642. So that needs to be revised.
Madam Vice Chair?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the district boundary line, the remainder in the residential portion is up to 98 feet? So the commercial overlay is 87, and then the remainder of the zoning lot is 98?
Yeah,
It goes 11 feet beyond,
Yeah.
yes.
Again, I'm not knowing, but it
So you're-
could be that they're subject to 7711.
But it's an overlay as opposed to a district boundary.
But I think that
So,
they still
okay,
apply.
we have had a similar case in Upper West Side where the zoning district, Upper West Side or Upper East Side, where the zoning district line was, commercial overlay was little shy of the total depth of the commercial footprint, and I think it was allowed to extend beyond 5 feet per that
For
regulation.
an overlay or a district?
I think it was an overlay, it was a,
Is an overlay not a district boundary line?
I don't think it's really treated, I don't
But
know
that
if it's
was a
treated the same
DOB.
way.
That was.
We had a
that was-
DOB interpretation.
It was a DO, and and that use was pre-existing, and DOB had approved it.
That's why. Then
DOB
it would
Was it the one with the note on the plans that
Yes,
noted about
yes,
section
yes,
77 blah
yes,
permits?
yes,
Okay, right.
So I'm not sure if that's being,
Well, it's for the applicant to
Yeah.
discuss.
Yeah.
I just threw it out that it may
Good
be an
point.
explanation,
Yes,
but
yeah.
I'm not personally familiar with this.
Okay.
Item number 3, 2017-270BZ, 1434 Utica Avenue, Brooklyn.
We have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing, of application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board will hear the case
January 16th,
tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Wednesday.
or, yeah, day after.
I'd like them to clarify that the use group listed in section 15-60, which is a threshold question, that this is one of, that the proposed use or that the existing use is one of those. I believe it is one of those, but I want them to clarify that it's one of those. And I'd like them to explain this sentence in the statement of facts. It was felt that compliance with section 43-121B3 was not achievable due to the requirement of complying with paragraph A also. I don't understand the sentence, I didn't see that to be the case, and we don't have the authority to waive compliance with B3. You have to comply with everything. So I didn't understand the sentence. The statement of fact states that the building was the subject of a pre-61 variance and was enlarged by 600 square feet in 1963. It also states that there has been no enlargement pursuant to section 11-412. Very confusing. I don't see how that's possible, right? Either you're in, unless it's a pre-61 enlargement, but it's a post-60. Well, Carlo's really the,
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm
yeah.
not having read the material, but it is possible that the iteration of 11-412 didn't come into effect, I think, until 1968. So in 1963, it may not have had the same wording.
I thought the reason was also the 58, when it was granted, the variance use was granted. At that time, the use was not permitted because it was a business district. The area was rezoned to M11, so which permitted the use as of right. And in 65, they filed the alteration plan to add the 600 square feet, which was issued as an as of right and did not require a BSA action. That's what and they have submitted the CO indicating that.
It's possible that...
So I don't know if, this is a question I have for you. Therefore, does it need to go under the 11?
Well, so
Under
11...
Article 1, Chapter 1?
Yeah.
Okay.
11-4-1 only contemplates the nonconformity that was approved. I think once this site became an M1 and the use became conforming, any non-compliances would have been existing. I think it's possible that they may not have been required to come back here.
So I think a little bit of clarification of that is needed. This is what I gathered from the document submitted and the statement, and they are complying with the underlying FAR, even with the 600 square foot addition.
Yeah, so, but it has to do with, not about the FAR, there's a maximum enlargement that's permitted, and there's also, it's a threshold question. You're not allowed, under the special permit, I believe you're not allowed to have, sorry, the use is not listed enough. Any enlargement permitted pursuant to this section, sorry, there was something about enlargement under 11-4-1, and whether or not you're allowed to qualify for this special permit if you were. The use for which is being sought in lawful.
It's 3.
Oh.
It's A3.
Yeah, here, yeah. So it's A3, yeah, sorry. So A3, the building in which such use is located has not previously been enlarged pursuant to sections 11-4-12, 43-121, or 72-21. It's a threshold question, so we can't sort of graze over it lightly. We can't issue this permit if it was enlarged under any of those three. And 72-21 wouldn't have applied because this is a pre-61 variance, right? So it seems like 11-4-12 it might have been enlarged since it was between 61 and 63 that it, between 19, up somewhere around 1963 where it was enlarged. So we need to understand,
The basis for
Yeah,
the
exactly.
enlargement, yes.
Yes.
Actually, I did look at the basis in the entire statement of facts, because I opened 7353, and like you said, Chair, item A3, it's kind of a finding. It says that it shouldn't be previously enlarged under this or this or this, 3 sections, and I went back to the statement trying to find out what was the basis for the enlargement they described in 1963, but...
And they're
I-
saying they're enlarging it as of right because of the underlying M1 zone. That's what,
Yeah.
and I don't know if
Part of
that's,
their
I'm
statement,
sorry, but could it be that the prohibition referenced in the special permit to 11412 would only apply if the use had remained non-conforming? Because otherwise 11412 wouldn't be applicable today.
Yeah.
right. That's what I understood.
I don't know, but they need to walk us through this because I don't know. Okay. Also, if, as fire department states, the use in the lot is a retail store and not auto repair, for one, are we sure that the statement required in A2 that the use has been lawful for at least 5 years is accurate? And then if it's retail, then it's not one of the uses listed in 1560 to which the special permit applies. So then it's undone again. There's a lot of thresholds in the special permit, more than most. Then, fire department had comments, says we request that plans be amended to show retail store along with interior layout of shelving. Now, if this is retail associated with it's accessory to the principal use, that's different, right? But fire departments, they said it's used as an auto parts retail store. The motor vehicle repair shop was discontinued in 2017, which is the use that it needs to be in order to qualify for this special permit. We were supposed to get revised plans. I don't-
Existing plans.
Revised existing plans, yeah. I didn't see that they
He didn't
came.
understand, yeah, he didn't understand and, when I called, so he didn't submit it.
The revised existing plans are to respond to the fire department's comments, no?
They were also incorrect, the ones that were
Oh.
in the record, so, but he didn't submit a new set,
Okay,
yeah, but it was completely incorrect.
completely incorrect. That's
Yes,
a lot.
It's a simple building.
Yes, well, maybe the
It
contents.
it showed an enlarged space on the second floor, and I spoke to him about it, and it was a completely different floor area that is not intended. He didn't even he didn't know why it was showing a different floor area, because not consistent with the enlargement he's requesting in this application.
And then, the certificate of occupancy refers to spraying. I'd like to know if that's still taking place, and if it is, they need to provide evidence of compliance with DEP regulations. There needs to be a spray booth, there needs to be permits. Images show cars routinely parked on the sidewalk. Here we go again, not lawful, how do we prevent it, et cetera.
I think the unfortunate problem is if you look at that entire area, it's not just that
Everyone does
particular,
it.
everyone is doing it, and that's the unfortunate part of it. That entire block front has auto repair uses, and all of them
Yeah.
are using the sidewalk for various
Yeah,
purposes.
yeah, you look at a satellite view and it looks like just a giant parking lot.
Yeah. Zoning chart states that there are 2 parking spaces proposed. It is not indicated in the plan, and the statement states that there is 1 car and 2 parking spaces. It's very confusing, so they need to just make it consistent And again, based on the use that's proposed, the parking calculation will vary, and that needs to be clearly indicated because the zoning does require parking, but it is waived if it is less than 15, and those have not been very clearly stated in the statement or in the chart.
Anybody else?
Regarding the neighborhood character, 7353-C requires that there is no impact on the neighborhood character. However, looking at the Google Maps, it sounds like this is going to be like one of just two buildings in the neighborhood that have their front as two-story portions. So it's rising to two-story. I can't see too many buildings except for one, which is two-story. All the buildings appear to be like one-story buildings. So we would like to understand how the proposed enlargement is not impacting the neighborhood character.
Right.
You need to clarify.
So this one, because there's also another very interesting section in the zoning resolution that's in the body of the manufacturing text, it's 43 out of what, which allows an as-of-right extremely large addition for certain types of manufacturing uses. And it's different. So it allows like an 150% enlargement, right? So what's behind that is not about the protection of the sort of look of the manufacturing district. Instead, what's behind that is public policy to try to encourage manufacturing industrial uses to remain in the city. And what's unfortunate about a lot of these districts is, especially like the M11s, they get one FAR. And so that's a one-story building. They're always built full to their lots, and they have no expansion potential. So that provision that's in the body of the main text and these special permits are to try to allow for the retention of these uses. So, and, they tend not to encourage 10-story buildings. Instead, they end up being 2-story buildings or something like that. So it's really a different public
But
policy
to
issue.
Commissioner Sheeta's
Yeah.
point, like that's an as of right.
Yes.
This is a special permit. And
Right,
so it
correct.
requires the board to make a finding that
Yes.
this enlargement will not and adversely impact neighborhood.
Yeah,
character.
no,
So they
you're
should address,
absolutely
yeah.
right. You're absolutely right. It's a finding. I just wanted to put sort of the public policy spin
Sure.
behind why these kinds of things are allowed. We don't see them very often, in fact, hardly ever.
No, we don't see this one.
So, anybody else?
I don't want to be repetitive, but my issue remained squarely in the threshold issues. I think that should be the major focus of tomorrow, because without it, it's just wasting our time.
Yes, correct. And I'm not sure we'll be able to answer it tomorrow because that's pretty tricky about
It
the
seems like-
history of enlargement and the use current.
It seems like something that needs to be in writing and needs to be substantiated. I did not think of Mr. Costanzo's point with regard to whether or not that is was a non-conforming enlargement prior, and that's a really great point that had not come to mind, but if that's the theory, at least with regard to the A3, that's something that they need to flush out in writing. With regard to the A2, I think that there is, I don't see them overcoming that, because it's clear, at least from the fire department, that use has been discontinued.
Yeah.
And if that use has been discontinued, we don't really have anything to do here. But to your question of earlier, is spraying continuing? I don't think so. I think that the motorcycle repair shop is now closed, and spraying may no longer be going on in the retail store.
Yeah, I think the Google Street View only showed like one of the one of the portion of the building is open where they are selling some parts, which is auto-related because there are cars parked in front. And so it seems some repair work is happening, but those are not as intense of the use as it was originally there. So they still need to clarify as to, is it going to be primarily automotive parts that are going to be sold, or is it going to be still auto repair shop and automotive parts, and which is the primary?
And has it been, and has it continued to
Right,
been?
right.
Because
It
that's the biggest, for me, that I don't see them overcoming that threshold because I think it's clear that,
I'm not
I don't-
disputing it.
I wouldn't say it's omitted, but I think it's pretty clear that this activity has not been continuous and is no longer happening to date, which kind of closes my review at that moment.
Well, and in addition to which, the finding is the use has to have been in operation for 5 years prior to issuance of the special permit. And the thing that you're allowed to enlarge is one of those uses in the list. So if you have another use, then you can't use that for your math, right?
And it also doesn't apply to this particular permit.
No, what I mean to
Right.
say is if you had a zoning lot that had 2 uses on it, for argument's sake,
You can-
and one use is not on the list and the other is, you'd be allowed to enlarge the use that is on the list. But you're doing the math against that use, not the other use on the site.
Just to tie the knot on what Mr. Costanza noted about 11412 potentially not existing as of 1961, it does exist in substantially the same form as of December 15th, 1961.
Yeah, but I think, just to go back to this discussion, I think with 7353, I think, I think that's more relevant. I mean, we'll look at the text, I'll look at the text, but if the use had remained non-conforming. So I don't know, again, if the enlargement at that time, which may have become conforming and complying, is still relevant.
And what you're saying makes me want to stress that I don't believe this should be clarified on an oral application. I think that the only way I'm going to be satisfied is to be reviewing it in writing.
Oh,
and-
yeah,
and-
of course.
And then, and being able to cross-reference it with research, because to make a decision based on words spoken isn't something I'm comfortable with when it's a
Yeah.
threshold question.
Absolutely.
I agree. Okay.
Item number 4, 2018-21BZ, 1773 East 22nd Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. We have proof of service of initial application to officials and proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors, although I don't think the latter actually made it into the correct folder, because it's not in the folder, I saw it on an email attachment. Community Board recommends approval with 4 opposed. They need to show on the proposed floor plans the dimensions of walls to remain that are counted towards the 50% retained exterior walls. That's to be able to check that the walls you're saying are you're retaining are actually retained. The proposal at over 1 FAR needs to be brought down to 1. There is a 5-inch further projection into the required front yard for increase in exterior wall thickness. The existing front yard extension is already a non-compliant condition. A note should be added to the drawings that DOB shall determine whether such increase in the degree of noncompliance with Section 23-45A is permitted by Section 23-44A8. I'm also not sure that such additional exterior wall thickness is permitted to obstruct the required front yard for the new addition, where it is not needed to align with the existing portion of the building. That's the language in the text. It says you can add exterior wall thickness to insulate an old building. And if you have an addition that you want to line up to that added thickness, you can do that. So you can pull it forward and line up, and presumably you're using also insulation on that new wall. But here, the new wall is set very far back from the existing wall, so it doesn't need to do that. And it's also extending beyond the required front yard. So I don't read the text as allowing this. And also including the fact that the enlargement contains more floor area than the existing, which is another one of the thresholds that your enlargement can't be greater than the existing building. Also, the extension shown as insulation exceeds the allowable 8-inch maximum at the second and third floor, and in all cases appears not really to be for insulating purposes. It's just using it as an excuse to make the building another foot or more, it's actually probably even more than a foot projection into the front yard. We don't have the authority to waive any of this, but it's playing around with this, and I don't think it's legitimate. They need to correct the section designations on the plans. They're referring to the wrong, or they don't give you the right sections. They need to clarify the joist to remain in longitudinal section drawing A10. And the building is tall compared to its neighbors. What's the reason for the 12-foot, 6th floor to top of ridge height? And on the attic plan, show the areas that are not floor area, if any. And then always add the note, removal of existing walls and/or joists in excess of that shown on approved plans will void the special permit.
My question was specific to the attic, was what was the floor to ceiling height of the attic? It's too high.
Anybody else? Okay.
I'll save it.
Ready, next?
Item number 5, 2018-39BZ, 1249 East 23rd Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. We have proof of service of initial application to officials and proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Although, again, I don't think the proof made it into the correct folder. I saw it attached to an email, but it wasn't in the folder. Community Board recommends approval with one abstention. With respect to the retention of existing exterior walls on the exterior, the existing attic can only be used to the extent that it is floor area, and the proposed and existing don't coincide to account for the claimed retention. So the drawings need to be corrected, and I think the attic is not floor area, the existing attic. In addition, far too little of the first and second floor exterior walls are being retained on the exterior. You especially can't count 4-inch bits floating in space as retention, and there is not a good reason for it. Just pull back the wall on the south 1 foot 8 inches to the original line, and that will be adequate. So it's not like you're gaining a lot in this situation by not retaining more of the existing fabric. And I have to say that I'm quite disappointed by seeing this submission like this, because I'm finding that after all of these years working with this particular architect appearing before the board, I actually frankly find it insulting, this kind of game playing, where the architect provides drawings showing bits of non-contiguous material retained, when this architect knows very well that that's not an acceptable approach. And the architect knows also well that the goal is to retain the integrity of the existing building prior to its enlargement, and has had plenty of time to learn that from this board. The proposed plans also don't accurately describe existing walls to remain and new walls. At the roof level, the roof plan doesn't depict what occurs at the attic level in the sections and elevations. There is a dimensional error in section B on A10. Floor to ceiling of the attic is not 14'2". It needs to show what areas in the attic are floor area. Drawing A5 has a shading key that indicates this will be shown, but it isn't shown. And the two-story rear yard incursion to 20 feet is based on the argument that the adjacent houses at lots 26 and 66 were approved at 20 feet by this board. However, these were approved in 2002 and 2008, and according to the rear yard diagram provided, were never built out, so those approvals have lapsed. Hence, the only shallow yard appears to be one adjacent at 23 feet deep, and all others adjacent are complying. The photos and satellite images, however, appear to indicate that Lot 26 was built, so there's a conflict in the materials provided. So we need field measurements on the actual depth of the rear yard and the height of the incursion within the 30-foot rear yard as built. The front yard is also proposed to be reduced from 19 feet at the first floor and 25 at the second floor to 15 feet at both floors, This appears to be a major departure from the standard on the block, and they need to discuss that. I didn't have a problem with the height, it's only an increase of 1 foot above the existing, and they need to add that standard note, removal of existing walls and/or joists in excess of what is shown on approved plans will void the special permit. Other comments?
My comment was with regards to the analysis. That is, what percentage of the lots have 20-foot rear yard depth and is built to the height of the building in the rear? Just wanted to.
Like have more than one story?
And how, right, so how much of the 20-foot rear yard is being retained to what height?
Okay. Item number 6, 2018-104, BZ, 1234-1238 East 22nd Street, Brooklyn.
So I didn't find proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors, so unless we get that immediately, we have to postpone this hearing. We have proof of service of initial application to officials.
And the community board has voted also.
No, but that's initial service. We don't have proof of notice of hearing.
Of tomorrow's hearing.
Oh.
And I looked everywhere. The community board recommends approval with 1 opposed and 2 abstentions. The proposed total side yard width is less than the required 13 feet. That needs to be corrected. It's totaling 12'9", it has to be 13. They need to show on the floor plans the extent of the existing joist to remain and outline of existing house. I don't understand the second floor existing perimeter wall calculations that don't show an existing wall enclosing the space on the east side of the house. It's just sort of flapping in the breeze. It therefore appears that very little of the second floor perimeter is being retained on the exterior of the building. They need to add a note, the standard note, removal of existing walls and joists in excess of that shown on the plans will void the special permit. This is an enormous house for the neighborhood that is subsuming the remaining existing house. I don't see what the need for the 20-foot rear yard incursion is at the portion of the lot where there's a second house. So this is for everyone who didn't just to know, this is 2 lots being combined. There are 2 existing houses. One will be demolished entirely, and then they're enlarging the other one. So the site where the house is being completely demolished, I don't see the need for the rear yard to be reduced. Nor is there any justification for a 2-story, 20-foot rear yard incursion on the main part of the house. And rather than an FAR study, and here they ask us for more than 1 FAR, which is not acceptable at all, there should be a floor area study to determine whether the requested amount of floor area is in excess of what's found in the area. It's a very large house in the neighborhood. This appears to be the only 80-foot wide private home lot in the area. They need to provide front to rear sections. There's only a longitudinal section, no front to rear. And they need to show the joist to be retained in the sections, provide a front yard study, and provide a building frontage study. So that's when we see these very large houses, it's how is it going to impact the community, right? Those are my comments. Others?
I do. The drawing shows that there's an 11-foot side yard on the south side, whereas the zoning chart indicates otherwise, and same thing with statements, so need to consolidate those documents. If proposing a 10-foot, 3 inches wide side yard, I would recommend widening the side yard to 11 feet on the south side and allow for a total 13-foot wide side yard as per the proposed. The 13-foot total side yard is required, and they are requesting a waiver for not meeting the 13-foot. And since this is such a, compared to all the other lots, this is a wider lot. So once the lots are merged, I would recommend that they make that side yard of 10'3" wider to an 11-foot. Then the total side yard width would be 13-foot, and they would not have to seek a waiver.
So they'd only need a waiver for one of the side yards, not for total side yard.
Right, not for the total side yard.
Yeah, so we never waive the total side yard width. right?
I think that is one of the,
We don't have the authority to waive the total side
I
yard
think
width.
that's
So
what
if they're adding up and it's not the minimum of
It's
13
not.
feet, it's not, it needs to be corrected. But I thought that, okay.
similar to your question regarding the neighborhood, they do need to provide the neighborhood context regarding the floor area, front yard, rear yard, and side yard, and lot coverage. Only maps were provided. I don't think the analysis was given. And they need to provide a narrative, especially when the proposed zoning lot is larger than the typical lot sizes, and how the larger massing is in keeping with the context.
I second that. My sticking point in this case is the context of the community, the character of the community, and how this fits in. And I did not see an analysis or anything that spoke to that issue, and I think that needs to be flushed out.
Anything else?
Item number 7, 2017-34BZ, 311 Adams Avenue, Staten Island.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends denial, stating that it opposes construction in the bed of a map street. I'm very confused by this, since there is no GCL 35 request nor any need for one.
I think in their statement of facts, they do mention that one is an unmapped street, and I think that might be where the community board misunderstood.
They didn't look at the drawings that showed no building in the bed of a map street.
Right.
Yeah.
That is part of, I really, okay, please.
But to give the applicant a break, I mean, if the community board is recommending denial for building in the bed of a map street and they're not, then they should reconsider. It's not fair. It's a full denial from everybody because they're building in the bed of a map street.
Which they're not.
Which they're not. So I think the applicant really, just to clear their own record, should go back and say, wait a minute, that's not what's done, right? But that's their business. It's just I think the community board got it wrong. We have 2 letters of objection citing height, small lot size, and parking. That'd be a different reason for the community board to object, right? There is no uniqueness study to speak of. The provided radius diagram doesn't establish the parameters by which uniqueness is claimed. The issue here is not necessarily that most of the lot is in the bed of a map street, but that the developable lot size is 16 to 18 feet wide by 65 feet long, and the site is vacant and a corner lot. Lot 27, which is a matching version, it also sits in the bed of map street, is nearly entirely in the bed of a map street, so it cannot be developed at all without a GCL 35 waiver. If such a waiver were feasible, which I doubt it would, because it's really right in the center of traffic. It's a very strange lot. The applicant needs to improve its uniqueness argument and really discuss the size of this 16 by 65 lot relative to the other lots in the neighborhood. With respect to flood zone compliance, we have June 2017 comments from DOB, but no ZRD1, CCD1. This latter has now been requested by the project manager. So this is a very awkward site with most of the tax lot within the bed of a map street and leaving very little buildable area. The project is very modest with complying 18-foot front yard for parking from Haven Street and complying 20-foot side yard facing Adams Street. My only concern actually is the height, which is mentioned by the letters of opposition. The house must be lifted to clear the design flood elevation and allow for usable parking and storage underneath, so you need to lift a little higher than what design flood requires. But the roof peak enclosing an unoccupied attic is very tall and brings the building to almost 39 feet above grade. So they really could reduce the slope on that roof. There's also a lot going on with the roof line of this tiny house. which could either be interesting and mannerist or overwrought. And I don't know what, it's actually, it's like a miniature house designed to look like a chateau. And there's something super cute about that, but I don't know whether you can accomplish all of that in such a teeny little house. But anyway, but it's well proportioned and all of that. So in this little dollhouse, there's a chateau. Anybody else?
Access to the attic is through a hatch and not through stairs. At least that's what I'm understanding. However, the third floor plan shows a stair direction, and that should be revised. It shows that there's a stair direction leading up, so that needs to be revised. I had a similar question, though within the permitted height requirement, can the overall building height be reduced? And I understand the slope of that building because it's a narrow thing. That's causing to the height. If there's a way to kind of flatten it out, maybe would be the way to go.
Right.
Floor
Hard to get real French mansard, though.
It is.
Yeah.
I do appreciate the architect's effort to come up with a good design,
Yeah.
and I do commend the architect for that. The floor to ceiling height for the garage and the non-habitable space, I think, can be reduced. That can bring the height down a little bit. And similarly, the pitch of the roof also can be, if the pitch of the roof is made a little bit more slanting and not acute, more obtuse, I think, is based on my geometry, then it can also bring the height down. And clarify why the parking in tandem is not feasible in the rear portion and access from Adams Avenue. And what I mean is not necessarily having to park within the building, but in the rear yard. And I think I know the answer. You do want to have a rear yard that can be used, and you don't want to give that towards parking. But it would be helpful to kind of make that argument clear, because since that was a community issue that was raised about the
Right.
parking. So if they can clarify why only from the front it is possible and not from Adams Avenue. In terms of the findings, I would like them to provide a neighborhood study of uniqueness and the site condition and the side yard and front yard parking condition, just to kind of strengthen their argument. I did have a question about the ownership verification with the abutting lots. I don't think I saw any documents, and the statement wasn't very clear, so if they could just provide.
Whether they own them in common, is that the?
I don't think so, but they just need to clarify, state that there was no common ownership.
Okay.
I looked through ACRES and I didn't find it, but I just want the
Sure.
documents to represent that.
Sure.
Anybody else?
I think there needs to be a bit more effort into the findings, particularly with regard to uniqueness in this area. There are lots of small lots in this area. And there needs to be some more information about how this is different than the other lots that are not too far from it. I understand the community's concerns with regard to the height of this application. I think they need to reason it a bit more why they need so much height, and I think they're going to have to eventually reduce it. And I'd also like a bit more financials with regard to hardship. Well,
Houses
financials, not,
have hardship issues. Private 1- and 2-family houses, for whatever reason, which we actually don't know the answer to, the board has traditionally looked at single-family and 2-family homes as more about whether the site provides for a habitable dwelling. That's where you get arguments like we've had, that a 12-foot wide house just
It's
doesn't
unlivable.
work. But a 15-foot wide works in this neighborhood where you find 15-foot wide houses like that. We also get ones that say a 15-foot wide doesn't work because in this neighborhood, the narrowest is 18 feet, things like that, right?
so in that case, I'd like a little bit more as to why this is the lesser variance, the least variance.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the section that I'm looking at, and in that, it's not very clear. I see several lines, and there is one section that says attic non-habitable.
What's the
which-
plan page?
Sorry, the plan page, it's section BB. It doesn't have a page number.
Oh, okay.
But though the plan page says section AA, but the section is section BB. In that, there are three horizontal lines, and I'm not sure which is, one is the final roof line, the other one is the beam that is running the whole length of the building. And then there's a lower one where it says attic non-habitable.
I think it's because you've got the crenellated roof. You're looking beyond at the different rafters. So you're looking at as the roof comes down, because it
I
makes,
see.
you know, that
Okay, that makes sense.
fairy tale
Because I was looking at that
castle.
and hopeful that some of maybe the rafters, the beam rafter that's on the middle can become the actual
Yeah.
floor to ceiling height of the attic space. And in terms of the bedroom heights and the living room heights, they really are at their minimum. So
Right.
the only place where the height can be reduced would be the cellar space and the attic space.
Right, and the cellar, because you have design flood that you have to clear, then you wouldn't be able to use it for anything if you just put your first floor at design flood.
Well, it's for parking and non-habitable, so how much floor-to-ceiling clearance
Well,
one needs? This
You
is
need
8.
7, 6. and
Right.
It's only 6 something, right?
So from the base flood elevation, base flood elevation is at 12, FRC is at 14, and then there's another 3 foot of
Yeah,
clearance.
so design flood is at 2'8" above grade.
Yeah,
So you need to have a minimum of 7'6" to be a legal anything,
Right.
a legal storage
Yeah,
space.
so there's not much
Right.
room.
So they're making it 7'8". So,
8 feet total, so which is, I mean, it doesn't leave much room.
right. Oh, I thought it's 7'8" above design flood, no. Okay, whatever, but,
So maybe that can be clarified also.
yeah.
In terms of,
And I'd also like them to, in their study, show any other three-story buildings in the area. That seemed to be a point of contention in some of the letters. So if they can, I believe there are other 3 stories, but did they cite them? 'Cause
So
didn't
I
see
was
that
just
in the
looking at
application.
Let him finish his sentence, because I
no,
didn't
no, he
hear
asked me a
the...
question.
Oh,
that-
No, I didn't hear what you said,
I was
though.
wondering if they cited other 3 stories. I did not find that in their
Okay.
application. Commissioner Shanda, did you?
So I was looking at the Google view just for that, to see if are there 3 stories. So the cellars are pretty high in this area.
Right.
So they almost, they have the 3-story height, but the cellar are not full stories. So that's the cellar slash basement. So like the building next to it has a very high cellar.
Okay.
So all of these buildings are 2.5 with a little bit of an attic. So the height part of it, I think, given the narrowness of the site, the floor-to-ceiling height, just factoring in the minimum requirement of the clearance and the floor-to-ceiling heights of the livable spaces, the room to negotiate is just in that
So with the
attic
attic.
space.
Yeah.
And it's the design of the building that's making that attic height very high. And can that be brought down through a different design, and will that result in a compromise of the overall design concept?
No.
That's for the
A little
architect.
bit, yeah. So you pick a different castle. It's just not Disneyland, it's another one.
So I think that's really where it's going to become an issue. And all of these buildings, if they were to build to today's FRC requirements, they would be
Much higher, right.
much higher than what they are today. So I, for one, would like to keep that in mind when thinking of the height in this case.
Thank you.
Item number 8, 2018-33-BZ, 31-41, 97th Street, Queens.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends conditional approval with 3 opposed. They say comply with all New York City Department of Building regulations concerning construction, including rodent abatement to ensure the protection of surrounding properties. Obviously, the site is a problem. My review of the Zola map, city planning's map, shows more similarly sized vacant lots that are indicated on the uniqueness study. I'd like them to explain the discrepancy. They're saying they're the only vacant lot, but I found others on Zola. I'm also not understanding the what's quote combined widths analysis. The subject is no longer a combined lot, having been subdivided by New York City some time ago. For similar reasons, the statement of facts is rather confusingly presented, as it speaks as if the two lots remain combined. All zoning analyses should be based on the 20 by 95 standalone lot. The argument is things like, if it were still a combined lot, then it would only be a .5 FAR or something to that effect. It isn't a combined lot, so why are we talking about if it were? The statement of facts and plans are inconsistent with two different floor area FARs for the proposed, which says both .98 and 1.19 FAR. I think 1.19 is actually what they're requesting. I didn't find in the neighborhood character study the proposed building inserted into the streetscape. There is a wire diagram, just a box, but I can't tell whether that represents the actual building height, so we need height comparisons. The statement of facts indicates that the standard building height is 25 feet, and that that is the proposed height for the subject building. That's what it says in the statement of facts, but the drawings indicate the proposed height is 29 foot 8 inches to the roof, 33 feet 2 inches to the parapet, and 38 feet to the top of the bulkhead. So how does that have anything to do with the 25-foot standard in the neighborhood? With respect to the minimum variance, the hardship complained of is the width of the lot. That does not justify an increase in floor area. There's also a statement that there are no 12-foot wide houses in the neighborhood without any support. 12-foot wide would be the as-of-right. Many of the houses look very narrow in the radius diagram, so they need to provide info on area, the house widths of an area. The site plan indicates that Lot 49 contains only a garage, and Lot 47 is the driveway for Lot 46. I would like to understand the ownership of these two lots relative to their neighbors with respect to future development. Section 23-461A requires an 8-foot side yard for 0 lot line buildings, and 23-461C requires 5 feet to 8 feet between buildings on adjacent lots. I believe lots 46 and 47 are in common ownership. It isn't clear the relationship between the owners of lots 49 and 51, and lot 49 doesn't exist on BIS. So, and the reason that I'm bringing all this up is if we encroach too much on the neighbor, and the neighbor is a standalone lot, then it won't be able to comply with the zoning regulations. So that would force it into a variance, right? The front balcony is projecting 6 feet into the front yard, which is only permitted if the front yard is more than 12 feet deep. So it's not, it's only 10 feet deep. So the depth of the proposed balcony is limited to 5 feet, and its width to 50% of the street wall width. However, I didn't see that a balcony is typical of this neighborhood's character, so they need to establish that it is. They need to clarify the concern about the parking requirements, which is expressed, I guess, in the community board's comments. Concern about the parking requirements. 2 spaces are required and 2 provided, though in tandem, which is not ideal. I don't see that this is prohibitive, however. Oh, it wasn't a concern by the community board. It was actually stated in the statement of facts. I can't provide parking except as tandem, but I didn't see that there's a prohibition against tandem parking, even though it's a 2-family house. I note that for a single-family home on a narrow lot, parking would be waived under section 25-243, so if they opted to do a single-family home, you wouldn't have to have any parking. So if you just sort of take that logic, then tandem parking for a two-family kind of would fit within the concept of the zoning. Also, the objection sheet indicates that only one parking space was provided. Meanwhile, the drawings are showing these two in tandem. So I'd like to know where the plans changed since they were reviewed by DOB, or was DOB commenting somehow on the tandem situation? Okay.
I looked at the uniqueness study and compared it to ACRES. I think they need to clean up the uniqueness study. There are a bunch of lots that were picked up that were just wide, like, for example, tax lot 45 on the subject block. 45, or I think it's 45, yeah. It's a fairly wide lot, and it's under single ownership, so I'm not sure why that was picked up as one of the potential sites. Similarly, Lot 8, and there are many other such lots that are wide lots with standalone homes that were picked up in the study area. So I think they need to just focus on the narrow lots and then cull it down to narrow lots that are in common ownership and narrow lots that are built, narrow lots that are vacant, and then clean up the analysis. Based on my assessment of it, I think there would be one or two more narrow lots that would get added, which would add to like total of 4 such narrow lots in this area, but they need to do the analysis. I have to say I was a little sympathetic with the whole history of this, how the city sold this property with a house and with the understanding that the house would, or with no clear direction as to whether the house would be standing or not, and then it was demolished. And now the owner was told that they could rebuild it and they were not. So it is very unfortunate that the owner had to go through this. And in terms of the tandem parking, this area, most of these homes were built in the 1920s, so almost none of them had any parking. So the fact that this housing is providing parking, given that it's not that there is a parking shortage, I think it would be appreciated by the community that if on-site parking is being provided. So I'm in two minds. I think it can benefit the community one way or the other, depending upon how we analyze it, and the argument is being made.
What can benefit?
Whether they convert it into, whether they do away with the tandem parking, and therefore there would be a neighborhood character issue, would be, it would be consistent with the neighborhood, that is, no parking is provided. However, recognizing that auto ownership has increased in this neighborhood, and so providing parking on site would also be beneficial to the community.
Well, but they're providing parking.
There are. So I wasn't, the argument that was provided that the tandem parking, I was okay with it for that reason.
Yeah, no, I don't think it, yeah. I was asking why the architect expressed concern about the tandem parking in their own submission, because it doesn't seem like it's prohibited in this district, as opposed to Staten Island, where there's, right? So, and then the reason that I brought up the parking waiver that's available for a single-family home on a very narrow lot was because in this district, zoning seems to be taking the position that it's okay to not have parking when you have a one-family home. So if it's okay to not have parking for a one-family, then why wouldn't it be okay to have tandem parking for a two-family if you just sort of
make that
continue the logic?
I understand.
I'm kind of responding to the architect's own apology for providing it in tandem.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, the height of the building, I don't know why the living room and the kitchen, they are split, and I think that split height can be reduced if the floor-to-ceiling height of the cellar is reduced to 7 feet, and that can bring down the ceiling height in the front.
I don't think it's allowed to go to 7 feet. I think it has to stay at 7.6.
It has to be at 7.6?
Yeah, I don't think you're allowed to
I
build
see.
structures anymore at 7.
Okay.
stay tuned.
Okay,
but-
then I stand corrected.
Yeah.
Or they can also make the slope of the car less steep and allow for a higher floor-to-ceiling in the living room area also.
Yeah, so I get why they did that split level, because it's how you get the car in,
Right,
and to be more efficient at the rear.
yeah.
I do understand why they did the split level, though of course it requires lots of steps. When you're inside the house, it's sort of a classic 1970s plan, going down, sunken living room,
Yeah.
like that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's not sunken, it's risen. And so as I was talking about the various, about the uniqueness, block 1424 lot 31 and block 1428 lot 22, they are narrow lots and are under single ownership, so those should be included in the uniqueness study also.
Yeah, so you did find also vacant. It's
Yeah,
a
I think
vacant lot, or?
These are vacant lot and under, and narrow lots and under single ownership. So I think in total it comes to like 4 or 5 such things.
Additional.
Total.
Oh, I thought there were like 7, but I didn't research deep into the ACRES. But I think the reason, which is why I commented on the confusion about being formerly part of a combined lot, is what some of the argument was, look at the other combined lots in the neighborhood, and this one is disadvantaged as a combined lot because of its history. So you can't do that, because way back when, it stopped being a combined lot. So the combined lot argument has to be taken out, and that's why you're seeing those vacant combined lots as part of it, and it just needs to be removed.
Right. I think we just need to go by the narrowness, that's it.
Yeah.
And keep it simple. And I
Right.
think that's why the uniqueness study, as I was looking at the chart, it was getting complicated by throwing all these other larger lots, which were at one point combined, or maybe, but that's not relevant, it's just go by the narrowness.
I think they have a good argument into uniqueness, just taking the facts as they stand today. And I'm not going to repeat what was said, but I think we all dove into it. I think the reason why is because it's pretty clear that the community here, this property as it stands now may be a bit of a nuisance to the community, and development here, as expedient as possible, is probably best. But I really hope that they soon come hear our advice about what needs to be done with their A finding. Because, at least in my review, that is the other comments we have are much more minor.
Right.
And has this applicant been before us?
I've seen the name before.
I don't think so.
You've seen the name before?
I've seen the name
Yeah.
before. I don't know that,
But I
Have they done variance?
I don't know that it's been
Yeah.
for variance.
I don't
No,
believe.
and I think this is an architect, so that's the reason why the uniqueness study is actually very detailed. And it was just detailed in a way that led them a little bit down the garden path, because not only did they use Zola, they checked it against ACRES, then they went on site visits and checked that what they were seeing on ACRES looked like the picture. Then they went to the Department of Buildings and verified, to the extent you can verify on the Department of Buildings website, that the buildings were whatever they said, right? So
I'm gonna
I've
say-
never seen an applicant,
So thorough.
yeah,
gonna
belt
take exception.
suspenders and 2 more things that hold up your pants,
I'm going to
right?
take exception to the idea that architects are more detailed than attorneys. Or
No,
thorough, by that matter.
but the reason I say it's an architect it's somebody who doesn't appear here very often, or maybe doesn't do variances, and in terms of persuading himself that it was unique, knew that the data from Zola is not totally reliable, the data from ACRES not totally reliable, that you had to keep moving until you quadruple checked. So that's why I was a little surprised when I looked at Zola and found more vacant lots, but the architect may have actually driven to the site and found out they're not actually vacant, or discounted it when they had a garage, which I wouldn't discount, because a garage is just a temporary structure, not even really floor area.
I think it's
right?
just his starting point. I think his starting point, if his starting point was the lot as it stands today, I think we would be in a different place. I think that his started point was the issue that this was once, and that took him down the road that is his current submission. I think the starting point was where we stand today and what this is today, and I think that would be at a different.
But I think he has all the data, just
It
needs to
shouldn't
be
be too hard for him to
reassembled.
reset it.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
This concludes the executive review session for January 15th, 2019.